What is a summative assessment? A summative assessment is usually a kind of test or challenge that comes at the end of a unit, um, or some chunk of learning when you want students to have the opportunity to pull together their abilities and to demonstrate them. Why do we call it performance? We call it performance because just like a performance on the athletic field or on the stage, it's the moment where students take all of their sort of individual day-to-day learning and pull it together into a cohesive whole that shows that they can apply, and by applying, ideally show that they can understand the content that we're and skills that we're teaching. So I want to offer a definition. A performance-based assessment is a test designed carefully to engage students to create something new. Now, not necessarily new for the world, but might be new for them, in order to exhibit their depth of knowledge in a measurable way. So a student writing an original paper on Hamlet may not be contributing to the scholarship on Hamlet, but in their experience, it is brand new, and that's new knowledge creation. So it's really a test, and it can look somewhat traditional, like an essay, or it can look like a project. But really, the DNA of a performance-based assessment is that it's asking students to apply what they know and what they're able to do in order to create something. Understandably, we all want to know whether or not students have accumulated knowledge over the course of the year. How do we test for that? A cumulative exam is often thought of as a test that has students remember lots and lots of facts and then often demonstrate some procedural knowledge. So, for instance, I might ask students to remember lots of rhetorical figures and figures of speech and define those. And then I may ask them to identify a figure of speech in a sentence. And they may be able to do that, but with a slight adjustment, I can take that accumulated knowledge and have it be expressed in a performance assessment. That might be to ask them to write a paragraph or a paper where they use 6 figures of speech effectively, or they use a range of grammatical devices. So I might ask them to adjust mood or tense in order to demonstrate their ability. But I'm asking them, importantly, to create something new and original so they can demonstrate and perform that knowledge. When we want to check on, grammar and figures of speech, that's a great role for formative assessment. Those small tests along the way, they can be in the form of quizzes or in the form of responses or discussions, sometimes graded discussions. Formative assessment are those ongoing checks with students to know whether or not new learning is being retrieved. And of course, as we work to develop durable understandings, we know that we can use devices like retrieval and spaced learning in order to improve their memory. Performance assessments, on the other hand, call upon the use of this knowledge. So ideally, you'll see these details emerge or not in their performance. I'll know whether or not they understand grammar and figures of speech because I will witness whether it is in evidence in a piece of writing or if it's not. So what a performance assessment isn't. A performance assessment is not the kind of test we've been talking about. It's a test that only seek recall of information and procedural knowledge, and often it's out of context. The worst case scenario is a test that is asking students merely to remember facts and figures and procedures from September. It's not that work you're testing on isn't important. It is. Except that a test like this often is testing a student's ability to remember more than to perform. Doesn't mean that learning isn't happening, but it may not be the kind of learning that best tells us whether deep understanding and mastery is taking place. So the question is okay, I want to do a performance-based assessment. How do I make one of these? Now, I know that many people are, working this way already. But if this is somewhat new to you, there are really, just think about this in 3 stages. The first is to ask, what are enduring understandings are you developing in your students? And write those out. And you'll recall that we spent a lot of time on alignment. All of those alignment documents have been revised, and they are linked in the handout that accompanies this video that Merit sent out, and that is on the note to the division. So, and of course, I can put you in contact with that immediately. And really, we're answering 2 questions in our areas. Students will understand that, what knowledge, what core knowledge is really at the center of the learning in a course, and then what core abilities. So we can write those out as students will understand that, and students will demonstrate the ability to. So let's look at this in my field of English, but this would hold for any discipline at all. Students will understand that successful communication is determined by purpose, audience, form, and content. And over the course of the year and over the course of their high school and McDonogh career, they're learning this. And we can check for audience and form and content variously, at various points throughout the term. But now I want to see them perform this. And I also want them to demonstrate an ability, and I want to see that they can utilize writing as a process for sense-making, sustained thinking, and communication. So critical analysis and critical reasoning. So I might create an assessment that asks them to take these 2 core pieces of the ELA alignment and put them to work. And it can be a traditional essay, but it could take other forms, a graphic, infographic, or a video, or an oratory. And then we create a test. That's the next thing. And this is where your creativity is really important. What challenge, task, or problem will cause students to demonstrate what they understand and are able to do? It doesn't have to be a multi-week project. One of the issues with project-based learning, as much of a fan of PBL as I am, oftentimes it asks for this multi-week deep dive. You don't have to go into a multi-week deep dive to do a performance assessment. Think of something a student might have to make for some reason. And for instance, it might be that you want students to create an original public service announcement about 3 adjustments a person can do to lower blood pressure and requiring their evidence and reasoning. Now that, again, it can take the form of a paper. It can be an infographic, a poster, a website. But the idea is that it's calling on them to create something that puts their knowledge and understanding to work. When I create an assessment, I'm always looking at the kinds of thinking I'm asking students to do, just to make sure that it's higher order thinking. And I have mentioned this to faculty for many years, Norman Webb's depth of knowledge chart. This is a worldwide chart. Everybody uses it to plan for and then to measure the kinds of thinking that's happening in a classroom or in an assessment. And typically, although not always, we try to keep those at level 3 around strategic reasoning and strategic thinking, because by creating lessons and assessments in that category, we're typically drawing on level 1 and level 2 categories. We're asking students to recall, we're asking students to apply concepts and skills in order to produce something new. Extended thinking often happens with sustained projects, but level 3 is typically where we want. And you'll notice the verbs there: explain, identify, design, reason, revise, generalize, analyze, synthesize. We do lots and lots of this already, and I'm happy to dig into this chart with anybody who's interested. And then finally, we evaluate mastery and understanding. So once you've identified your enduring understandings, what they want to do, what you want students to do, and what you want them to know, we then create a test, a performance assessment, and then we make sure that it's asking for higher order thinking whenever possible. And then, of course, we have to determine what the criteria are that will count as evidence of success. This is your rubric. It doesn't have to look like a traditional rubric. It can be a checklist of things, however you decide to organize it. But this is the criteria that I would suggest people hand out to students at the beginning of an assessment and then use to assess the work, so that students know exactly what they're being asked to do and to think about. And the more creative and generative the work is, the less they can have it sort of ready to go. They actually have to do some thinking, and it creates a real great opportunity for extended learning. And that is essentially a quick overview of performance assessments. And I just want to remind you, as always, you'll never walk alone, to quote Rogers and Hammerstein. Give this approach a try and give me a call. Other people on this campus are really comfortable working in this way. Certainly Robin, many of you know, and a lot of colleagues do performance assessments. So reach out to me at any time and know that I'm more than happy to work with you. And I just want to thank you for your openness and your consideration.